Hi, this is Sandy from Spitfire's Customer Experience team, and in this video, we're going to take a quick look at Angular Strings Evolutions. I'll give a quick tour of the interface, and then we'll look at each section in a little more detail. Looking at the very top, we have some information on our system performance. We also have some global controls, and some options in the top right. Underneath that, we have our preset browser, and our button for collapsing the interface. We have the main controls, such as dynamics and expression, and then underneath here we have some more advanced controls. This is where we'll find our Evo grid, our effects, and our signal mixer. And at the very bottom, we have our keyboard displayed, which shows us a coloured range for the different Evos that we've assigned. This has some octave controls on the left-hand side. And finally, in the bottom left, we have an information panel, which will display some useful and pertinent information when you hover over anything on the interface. Starting in the top left, we have a little LED that will display whether or not we've loaded. This will be solid green when the instrument is ready to play, and it will be flashing red and green when it's loading. If you play whilst it's loading, you might hear some unusual sounds, so it's best to wait for this to be green. We also have indicators for our CPU, our disk, and our memory, as well as a display of the number of voices that are being used right now. And then to the right of that, we have a refresh button, which will refresh the entire plugin. This can be useful if you've got any hanging MIDI notes, or if you just need to refresh the plugin. On the right-hand side at the top, we have controls over our MIDI channel, global tune and pan, master volume, and then we have our MIDI options and our global settings. We'll come back to those at the end. Underneath that, we have our preset browser, which is displaying the default preset, which is Angular Strings Evolutions, a good start. We can navigate back and forth through our presets by clicking on the right and the left arrows here. And we can save any preset that we might have made by clicking on this floppy disk icon, giving it a name and hitting save. If you'd like to browse the list of presets, simply click on the name here. We can scroll up and down this list, favourite any that we particularly like, and listen to previews by clicking on the little play button. And if we hover over this eye icon, we can see some more information about that particular preset. On the left-hand side, we have some tags, which will allow us to mine down and find exactly what we're looking for. There's also a user tag, which will show you your presets that you've made yourself. You can clear all the tags by clicking on the clear button in the top left. If we find a preset that we like, we can click load, or simply double-click it. Underneath the preset browser, we have our main controls. These are expression and dynamics. Expression is simply a volume control, and this is assigned to MIDI CC11 by default. And we also have dynamics. In most of our libraries, dynamics will control the different dynamic layers of the audio, but due to the way that evolutions are recorded, the dynamics control is also just a volume control in this case. This is on CC1, or the modulation wheel of your keyboard. To the right of these, we have the knob. We can click in the centre of the knob here to see what's assigned currently, change what's assigned to the knob, and make any adjustments by clicking and dragging. Any of the controls can also be adjusted by hovering over and using the scroll wheel of your mouse or trackpad. You can make assignments to any of these controls by right-clicking, or control-clicking on Windows. You can remove the existing MIDI CC and learn a new one. Underneath these general controls, we have three different views that I mentioned earlier. The first of which, and the default, is the Evo grid. This is probably the most important page in the evolution libraries. Along the x-axis, we can see our keyboard divided into different pitch ranges. And along the y-axis here on the left, we can see the different categories of evolution. We can scroll up to see more. To assign an evolution, simply click on the circle and you'll see it light up. You'll also notice that the keyboard at the bottom of the screen is changing colour to show us what ranges are in what categories. On the left-hand side, we also have some buttons for randomizing. We can click Feeling Lucky if we want to randomize with any of the available 48 evolutions, but we can also click on one of the categories to randomize within that category. So we have Scary, Tense, and Simple. We can also randomize within the visible evolutions. So for instance, I can see evolutions 30 through 45. So if I click here, they'll be randomized within that range. And the final option, Walk, is probably easier to show than tell, but this will move each evolution up or down by 1. To the right of our Evo grid, we have 3 controls per evolution, a checkbox to choose whether this evolution will be sent to the effects, an overall volume for this particular evolution, which can be useful for balancing if you've got very different techniques mapped across your keyboard, and a stereo pan. Clicking on this icon in the middle here will change our view from the Evo Grid over to the effects. Here we have controls for our tape saturation, our delay and reverb, which again can be assigned MIDI CCs by simply right-clicking. Underneath each of the three sends, you'll find controls which will affect the timbre of that particular effect. So for instance, warmth for tape saturation, or dampening for the delay effect. The third and final view over here is the signal mixer. Here we can mix between the different signals that we have available to us. There are 6 of these in Angular Strings evolutions. We can see the 4 here, and if we click on these arrows, we can see the remaining 2. You can enable or disable any of these signals by using the toggles underneath the fader, or by simply clicking and dragging the fader. If you drag it all the way to 0, it'll be switched off by default. If you find a balance of signals that you really like, you can save that as a mixer preset by clicking on this button here. You can give it a name and click Save. And then, if you have a different mix and you'd like to load that mix that you've just made, you can click Load Mixer Preset, choose the preset, and click Load. And on the right-hand side here, we have some standard controls for an ADSR envelope and a variation control, which will slightly alter each of the evolutions. If we've got this set up nicely and we don't want it to change, we can click on this padlock to lock the mixer. Clicking it again will unlock it again. Going back to the top right here finally, we have our collapse button, which allows us to collapse to a much simpler interface, or expand again to see the other controls. We have some MIDI controls here, where we can adjust our velocity response, and also clear our CC mappings, or reset them to the defaults. And then we have our global settings. Clicking on this will open a window where we can adjust various settings. Under General Settings, we have the option to copy any changes that we make here over to all of our other Spitfire products, for instance Hans Zimmer Strings or Eric Whitacre Choir. Under Interface, we can find options like resizing, whether or not the window will open in its collapsed or expanded view, as well as choosing whether we want to display gain values in decibels rather than a percentage. This is also where you'll find the option to disable host automation. This can be useful if you've got some sort of conflict in your DAW between MIDI and host automation. We also have some audio options here, such as the maximum voices, preload buffer size, and stream buffer size. These should be left well alone if your plugin is behaving normally. I would only recommend looking here if you're troubleshooting a performance issue. And then we also have the plugin options here, where we can choose our default preset by simply clicking and choosing one from the list. Once we've made some changes and we want to save these, we can click on Save, or we can just cancel out and the default settings will be left alone. And last but not least, we have an About page here, where you can find out about the EULA, any acknowledgements, and other licensing information. That's it for our tour of Angular Strings evolutions. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at spitfireaudio.com/support. Thank you.